Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Hutchinson, and welcome back to the FYE Talks podcast. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m., bringing you awesome content on a wide variety of different topics. And we have a very special guest today, and I'm going to let him introduce himself now.
All right, my name is Joshua Embry, and I'm the Public Health Director at Grayson County Health Department.
Awesome. And so today we're talking about vaccines because obviously this is super relevant to our current pandemic situation and has been for quite a while now. And rightly, people are confused. They want more information. They want to know that what they're hearing is credible. And so we're here today to kind of talk about that. And so, Joshua, can you explain what a vaccine is and how it helps stop the transmission of infectious diseases?
Sure. Basically, what a vaccine does, and vaccines have been around for years and years and have been credited for saving countless lives. With the coronavirus vaccine, basically what happens is your body, when you get the injection, there is a what we call messenger RNA that attaches itself to the cell, and it basically shows the body what the virus looks like. Very typical of any other vaccine. And so then your body knows how, not only, your body recognizes what the virus looks like. And so it can fight it off. So in the case of the coronavirus vaccine, with the Pfizer and the Moderna, basically you're having a process of create, learn, and react. So your body is, once it gets the injection, it's kind of like a mugshot. You see the mugshot that and you know what your perpetrator or or the person looks like. Same thing with the vaccine. Your body can recognize it and know that it's a threat and work to fight against it.
Awesome. And so, with that, do you feel people still have misconceptions about vaccines? So you hear a whole lot of different things about vaccines. People have a lot of questions. Do you feel like there's still, even though they've been around quite a while, a lot of questions about them?
There are, and there's a segment of the population that still very much believe that vaccines can be harmful. That's not 100% true. That's not very true at all. There are some people in the population, if you look at the CDC's website, it basically says that, they may not be candidates for certain vaccines, but overall, vaccines are safe and can help us all. So I think that with the current uh, place we find society in, with all the disinformation, social media, and how misinformation can spread quickly, people get the wrong idea about things. And unfortunately, we've been dealing with this for years in public health with an array of vaccines, but particularly here more recently with the COVID-19 vaccine. So yes, it's still very prevalent, misinformation and a misunderstanding of vaccination processes.
Gotcha. So you find yourself having to explain that, with a lot of different vaccines in your department?
I think that again, that segment of the population, as far as the vaccines that have been around for a while, not so much. But for the COVID-19 vaccine, it's new. We know that it was created quickly, and a lot of people think that's a bad thing. But as Dr. Fauci has said numerous times, and other scientists, that no corners were cut. There was nothing done, shady with this vaccine whatsoever. The proper steps were taken. So I think that the speed of this vaccine has caused more people to question. So to answer your question, it's more so with the COVID vaccine that we're seeing people ask a lot of questions about.
Absolutely. And so with rolling out the vaccine, this has kind of been different than a lot of other, vaccines, obviously, because we've had to do with the social distancing and just the speed of it and whatnot. And so can you explain more about the way that delivering the vaccine has been done here in Kentucky? I know there are phases, and I think a lot of people are kind of confused. There's different sections and things. Can you just kind of give a general overview of what that looks like?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the vaccine was developed through Operation Warp Speed. And then from there, it was pushed out from the federal government to the state governments to kind of push out in the best way they see fit. So in Kentucky, particularly for Kentucky, a lot of information and data was looked at, but more so just the population of the state and in certain areas. So, for instance, it makes sense that areas that have a higher population and have been more impacted by the spread of this virus, that they have received a little more vaccine. I do know, though, that the state has not wanted to leave rural areas out. Grayson County, the county I have the blessing of serving, is a rural area. And so they've tried to make it as fair as possible with the distribution. So a lot of information is considered, a lot of data, like I said, with the population statistics and stuff, which is why census reports and doing your census is so important. But that has determined the vaccine flow. So it came from the federal government into the state. The state looked at an array of information to determine how best to distribute out the vaccine.
Gotcha. And so is everyone following the same general plan as far as, this group and then this group and then this group, or is that left up to different medical departments?
Kentucky Department for Public Health has been very the message has been consistent that they want all of us to be on the same page.
Mhm.
However, they recognize that each county, each area has its own struggle. So we try to be on the same page as much as possible for consistency. And one of the ways that we've tried to do that is actually with the phases, the phase
Yeah.
1A, 1B. And so we're trying as a state to march to, a beat of a drum that may be a little bit different. We're trying to stay in step with one another, but the drum beats a little different for us all.
Absolutely. And so, just as a question that we had requested, if somebody were to miss their vaccine or miss their appointment, what happens to that leftover vaccine? Is it able to go to someone else or is it destroyed or how does that work?
Well, I can speak, for Grayson County, and I think it's pretty consistent across the state and hopefully across the country. What happens is if we have somebody who calls and cancels or just doesn't show up,
Mhm.
our rule here, our policy is vaccine does not go wasted because it should never be wasted, even if you have a lot of it, but it definitely should not be wasted when you don't have enough.
Absolutely.
So I think it becomes even more of a horrible mistake when that happens. So if somebody cancels their appointment or they don't show up, we basically go down a wait list of people who are waiting, and we call and we say, hey, we have this dose left over. It has to be used within a certain amount of time because once you pull those vials out and they dethaw, you have to use the vaccine within a certain amount of hours. So you basically go down the list and you start calling people and you get the person who can be here the fastest. We try to adhere to the phases, but for instance, if we go down through 1B, which was not possible here because we got over 1,500 names
My
on wait list.
question was how lengthy was the wait list?
Yeah, 1,500 for 1B.
Okay,
I would 10 times rather give it to somebody in 1C, even though we're not in that phase, than to let a dose go wasted.
absolutely. And so with the vaccine, we know that there are two different, I don't know if brands is the right word, but two different companies, doses, brands, something of that label, Moderna and then Pfizer. And so which of those do you think you have given the most of, or if you keep track of that information? And do you see any difference between the two? Because I know that's another point of confusion for people is, okay, what's the difference between Moderna and Pfizer? And should I request one or the other, or does it matter?
The vaccines both utilize the mRNA phase that I was talking about, or the
Mhm.
process, but the way they are stored is much different. And that has affected the distribution of the vaccines. For instance, in rural areas, you'll see that Moderna tends to be utilized more because the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at such a cold temperature. You have to have special refrigeration units, freezers to be able to do that. So
Gotcha.
when you get out from your more larger, hospital facilities, healthcare facilities, a lot of your health organizations, they just simply do not have the ability to store the Pfizer vaccine.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of similarities for how the process happens and how the vaccine works and how it defends you, as well as both vaccines are pretty. Last time I looked, as far as their effectiveness, they're both in the 90% range of after you get your second dose of it helping to protect you after so many weeks. It's just the storage of those vaccines that make them different. Also, both vaccines, you have to get 2 doses. The Pfizer vaccine and the time span in between the second dose and the Moderna vaccine is a little bit different as well. But overall, the vaccines are the same. They do the same thing. It's just the logistics of it that makes the vaccines different.
Gotcha. And so do you see with the second phase of this coming, because as you mentioned, this is a two-part vaccine. Do you feel like rolling out the second part of this vaccine is going to look very similar to the first part, or do you think it might go a little faster? People will already be, already vaccinated once, that's a little safer, so you might be able to move a little quicker. What are your observations on that?
Well, one of our goals here, there's been chatter about the first dose and can you give the first doses out and should you hold back second doses when you're talking about phases. That's what you're talking about, correct? The
Yeah.
first dose and the second dose.
Yes.
What we try to do, and I know it's been pretty much consistent across the state, is when we give somebody their first dose, they actually get a little card issued by the CDC that says, the lot number of vaccine and the date. And then also they will get that filled out again for their second vaccine. So the majority of people get an appointment made on their, when you go to get your first vaccine, when you're going to get your second.
Gotcha.
At the health department here, it's been a little bit different because of the flow of vaccines. So what we do is, of course, we got in, in our system, the names of everyone who's received their first vaccine. We're queued to go back in and schedule a second appointment when those second doses become available, and we call those people and schedule their second dose. Same vaccine, very similar to the first. However, symptoms can be a little bit different from the first and the second dose.
Gotcha. And so what kind of symptoms would you be looking at with that?
Well, if you get on the CDC's website, and this is something very similar that I've went through with my second dose, my first dose didn't affect me, and I got the Moderna vaccine. I was fine, just had a little bit of soreness in my arm. The second dose, I got it around 9 a.m. that morning. Around 11 at night, I started to have really bad cold chills. I was shaking. I was running a fever, and I just felt really, really bad. And that lasted for a few hours, and I had a really bad headache. And the next day I had night sweats where the fever was trying to break. If you get on the CDC's website, that's something that's very common for the Moderna vaccine for the second dose, because you're getting that boost dose and your body's like, oh yes, here it is again. So it reacts. So that's a good thing. And so a lot of people ask us, am I going to get sick if I get the dose or if I get the vaccine? The answer to that is probably with the second dose, maybe not with the first, but most likely with the second.
Gotcha. But you're not going to be experiencing, full COVID if you had caught,
No,
and you're suddenly
no.
dealing with the loss of taste and smell and whatnot.
Our goal is to educate people, not to scare them. We want to be honest with them and say, hey, you're probably going to have a little bit of discomfort with this. Maybe the first dose, probably with the second dose. It's not going to be near as bad as COVID. It's not going to be deadly. And it's just a natural reaction. It's the same thing as when babies go get vaccinated. I remember when my little brother, when he was an infant and he would go get his shots, I felt so bad for him because he would run a temperature. He wouldn't feel good. It's the same thing with this vaccine. It's just your body's way of reacting, and it's showing you that it's working.
Awesome. And so just some speculation about the future. Do you see a chance for pandemics like COVID-19 to become a little more common with your experience in public health?
Well, you just got to understand geography and understand that, there's a lot of good things about globalization. As we can travel better and move about better, it's great for the economy. It's great for us to experience different cultures and see different parts of the world, to do business all over the world. But as we become more intermingled, the chance of spreading viruses, it increases. Common sense. The more people we're exposed to, the likelihood of us getting some type of virus goes up. So I believe the more we see our countries connected, which is a great thing, it's a good thing. I think we will continue to see the chance of other pandemics, and I think that that's not going to be we're not going to be able to avoid that.
Mm.
However, what I will say is that we've learned a lot from this particular pandemic. I've been in emergency management now for several years. I thought that this scale of pandemic, I might see it, but probably wouldn't in my career. But
Mhm.
I have seen it, and we've learned so much from our school system, from our hospitals, for how we communicate and how we interact with one another. I think we'll be able to use this information for the good.
Awesome. And so thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. I think that you've really provided us with a wealth of information that we can use to then make educated choices and help others in our community become more educated about vaccines. And so, would you like to drop any resources where people might find some more information or figure out what phase of the vaccine they kind of fall into?
Sure. You can always visit the CDC's website. That's cdc.gov. There's a wealth of information about, pandemics and viruses and basically anything you would want to know about any vaccine. I will say that any state that puts procedures and policies in place to help mitigate or end a pandemic is going to be built on the foundation that comes from the CDC
Mhm.
or the World Health Organization. So those are both reputable sources. Just be careful what you're looking at. Do not get your medical information from social media. In an academic setting, we're always taught to make sure that the sources you use are reputable. And it's the same thing with your health. Make sure the information you are getting is coming from a reputable source.
Absolutely. So thank you again for coming and speaking with us. This has been the FYE Talks podcast. Remember, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. for another awesome episode just like this one. And we will hope to see you at the next one.